Hi there, this is Jennifer. So glad you're joining me. A few weeks ago, I did a video talking about the three different card sizes that I like to make, A2, A6, and A7. I'll link to that video here if you missed it. It'll be linked in the description below and up here on the top right. Now, today I thought I'd play more with those different card sizes and create 3 cards, all using the same products in the different sizes. I will also be using different techniques on each of the card with the same product. So really this is just about stretching our supplies. I also have some tips along the way that I hope are helpful for you when you do any kind of inking on your cards. And by the way, stay tuned to the end of this video where I wanted to share with you some deals and some fun new things that you might be interested in. All right, now let's review the different card sizes briefly because I will do all 3 today. On the left, we have the size that I make most often, as do other YouTube card makers. It's A2, that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. Then in the middle, we have the biggest of the card sizes, which is 5 by 7, which I know many of you also create. Then there is the less common A6, which is 4 1/2 by 6 1/4, which I really like and I encourage you to try. It's a fun, different size and a great way to really fit more on your card. Now, of course, there are other sizes like slimline and so on, but these are the 3 that I feel are very comfortable to approach and worth giving a try. So I will make one of each of these sizes today. I will link below to the envelopes that I like for these sizes, and remember to check out that other video on how to make note cards in these sizes very easily. But please keep in mind, you can make your card any size you want it to be as long as you can fit it into an envelope. All right, the product that I'm choosing to use today is from Spellbinders. First, on the left-hand side, we have the Glimmering Peonies. This is a large hot foil plate, and coordinating stencils are available. Then we also have the Spellbinders Glimmering Buttercups, which is on the right. Again, a large hot foil plate and coordinating stencils. Now, if foiling isn't your jam, I totally understand. You could do today's technique with large stamps, like maybe large floral stamps or any kind of large image, and color it in any way you want. But I thought these would be fun to demonstrate on the 3 different card sizes. But as I'm going, remember, if you don't do foiling, you could instead do the same designs with stamps. Okay, let's do some foiling. I'm using my Spellbinders Glimmer machine, and I have a piece of navy cardstock here. This is a great bright navy cardstock from Spellbinders. I believe it's called Cosmic Sky. I really like their cardstock. I also have a piece of Spellbinders Aura Gold Glimmer foil. This is one of the easiest foils to use. It's gold with like an iridescent shine. I love how it shines. I'm creating a little hinge with tape on my hot foil plate and sliding the foil in between the cardstock and the plate, so the pretty side of the foil touches the pretty side of the plate. I will then flip that over and put it onto the warmed up gray portion of the Spellbinders Glimmer machine. I'll put the plates on top, press the timer button. When the timer button stops flashing, I can take all of those plates out and run it through my Spellbinders Die Cut machine, the Platinum. Now this machine will provide the pressure to transfer that foil beautifully. So now we can peel the foil off and look at that gorgeous result that we have. I love foil on dark colors of cardstock. Now keep in mind the leftover foil you can use on another project. I'll link to a video that shows how to do that. I won't be doing that today. I'll just save it for later. And by the way, this big piece of cardstock I will trim down to be an A2 size later on. Sometimes it's easier to start with bigger pieces. Now this time I'll create a card panel that is for an A6 card. So this size will be 4 1/2 by 6 1/4. I'm starting with a piece of teal cardstock cut to that size. I have a piece of that Aura Glimmer foil. On top of that, pretty side facing up, and then I put the hot foil plate right at the center facing down. So this time I'm trying to center that plate at the center of the cardstock. I'll flip it all over, put it on the Glimmer machine, put it on the plates on top, push the button, wait for the timer, take all those plates out, run it through the die cut machine, and we'll get a beautiful transfer of foil onto this bigger piece of cardstock right there in the center. Now the darker blue one that I did a moment ago, I'm going to trim down so it's kind of off center. This time I wanted it centered right on the cardstock. Now let's do the foiling for our biggest card, which is 5 by 7. And I really wanted to fill that background with the same foil plate. So what I did was foil it twice, once towards the bottom and once towards the top, which really fills it nicely. So the 5 by 7 piece here I have is Hammer Mill Smooth White Cardstock. I will link to the particular one that I use in my description below. Now this is a super smooth cardstock that foils flawlessly. If you do a lot of foiling, it's one that I recommend. It also is good for ink blending. Really, the smoother the cardstock or the more high quality the cardstock, the better your foil will be. So I am putting the foil plate towards the bottom corner here, using that tape as a hinge to kind of hold it where I want it and put the foil between. I will now pick this up and flip it over and put it onto the warmed up gray portion of the Glimmer machine, put the plates on top, press the timer. When the timer's done, I'll run it through the die cut machine, which will press that hot foil into our cardstock. Now you'll see this gives a beautiful result. So if you struggle with foiling, try Hammer Mill. I find that is really easy to foil on. So is any kind of glossy paper, like a white glossy or black glossy or even a gold glossy. So now I've done the foiling in one corner. I'm going to move up to the other corner and position the same glimmer plate up in that corner with some foil between. I'll flip this over and hold it in place. Now, I'm trying to make this fit in here, and you just want to make sure it fits on that platform, and it does. This is going to fit fine through my die cut machine once we do the heating up of the plate. So one of the best ways to make your supplies stretch to fit on bigger cards or to fill bigger cards is to use it kind of on the bottom and then on the top of the card and have it meet in the middle there. Okay, so now we have 3 card panels. I will trim that navy one down, but they'll end up being 3 card panels of 3 different sizes using the same type of foil plate. Now let's add some inking to each of those, and I'm going to do each one a bit differently. I'm starting with the A6 simply because that's where I decided to start, and I thought I'd show you how I like to do inking on a darker color of cardstock. There are a few things you can do. I will talk about them as I go and also show more on my smaller card front, but this is one of the easiest. So these coordinating stencils line up very easily with that foiling that we've done. And I'm starting with the first one. Really, it doesn't matter what order you go in. These stencils are easy to line up and it makes for simple coloring. Now I have a blue cardstock here, like a medium to light blue cardstock. So I'm going to put blues and greens on top of that, a little bit heavier handed. I'm using the new large Spellbinders blending brushes. Boy, do these blend like butter. If you like doing backgrounds or covering large areas, these big mama Spellbinders blending brushes are divine. I recently bought a bunch more of them, and I will be using them in videos. It's a great option for quick, fast blending, especially over those large areas. Now to get in the smaller areas, I will use the other stencil kind of as a mask to mask off those leaves because I don't want those to be blue. I want to make those green. Before I move on, let me show you one of these brushes without ink on it. It is super, super soft. You can see it's very full of the bristles or hairs or whatever. Very soft, so it's great for blending. Now I did want to add a bit darker color at the base of these little flower petals, so I'm coming in with a darker color. This is Deep Ocean from Hero Arts. These are all dye inks. It really doesn't matter what brand you use. I'm just using whatever colors of dye inks that I feel will work best. All right, so now let's move on to cleaning this stencil. To clean my stencils, I use a quick spray of rubbing alcohol. I've really been liking it in the Mighty Mister spray bottle, which does kind of an extended spray, so you can do one spray over the whole stencil, wipe it down on both sides with a dry cloth, and it's cleaned off and ready to go. That spray bottle is fantastic. Now I'm placing that same stencil back on because I need to do the leaves, and I didn't want to accidentally pick up any of that teal ink that I had left over from before. So let's move on to the green for the leaves. I am putting green on top of blue. So I decided to go for a really bright green that I knew would tone down when I put it on the blue. So I switched to the Altenew micro blending brushes. These are also new. They're very small brushes, great for getting in tiny areas like this. I like that the bristles are very short and they're flat, so they work great for blending. These are the two sizes that come in the micro brushes box. There's 2 of each in a box. Really like these, been getting a lot of questions about them, so I thought I'd show today. But really, what I'm doing today can be done with whatever inking brushes or tools that you may have. Again, I'm using all dye inks for this particular card example. Now, this is a good reminder that dye inks are transparent inks. They're inks that you can kind of see through. So if you were to put like a yellow ink on top of a blue cardstock, it won't appear yellow, it'll appear green because that yellow ink is transparent or see-through. So whatever color I put on here, that blue behind it's going to show through. But because I'm using blue cardstock and doing blues and greens on top, it'll blend and look lovely. You just want to stick to colors that are close to each other on the rainbow. Now, if you would prefer to use an ink that you can't see through as much, I would recommend using a pigment ink for this process, or oxide inks, Distress Oxide inks from Tim Holtz. The reason is pigment inks and oxide inks have a pigment property to them that causes them to sit more on top of the paper and be more opaque, like you can't see through them as much. Now, some of the color, that blue color, would still show through, but not as much. So you could instead use pigment inks or oxide inks here. I really think Distress Oxide inks are fantastic, and they would be a great option here if you wanted more vibrant color that doesn't show the colored cardstock from behind as much. Now, if you want to see oxide inks in action on over-colored inks, I just did a live a couple days ago. I will link to that live up here on the top right and in the description below, and you can see stenciling with oxide inks. However, today I just went with the dye because I wanted this stenciling that I put on top to really blend in with the background. By the way, you can see here how that larger brush really makes it fast to cover a large area. So I wouldn't only use this larger type of blending brush over stencils, but I would also use it when I'm doing like a blended background. Now here, I didn't feel like I needed to use the large brush because I only have these tiny areas to fill, and I didn't want to use up as much ink, so I'm just using the smaller brush. I like having different size brushes available, but keep in mind you could do all of the stenciling with one size brush. If you are unsure which one size to get, if you want to stick with one, I recommend like a medium size brush that could be used for all of them. By the way, for the flower centers, I used orange ink on that blue cardstock, so it comes out brown, but that's what I was going for, like a warm brown. I absolutely love the result of this, and I think we often forget to use coloring of stencils on top of colored cardstock. Okay, now let's go back to the navy foiled piece. This time I'm going to do some light inking with a pigment ink, and this is really impactful on dark cardstock. I highly recommend trying it out. So I'm lining up the layering stencils with the foil image. I could do dye inks over this, but it would get really lost on that dark cardstock. So instead I'm coming in with a white pigment ink. This is Hero Art's Unicorn White Pigment Ink, and I'm using a Tim Holtz mini ink blending tool to apply it. I really like using foam applicators when applying pigment inks like this one. Notice that I'm putting it heavier towards the center of the flowers and leaving the tips a little bit darker, just for a little variation. What will happen here is that white pigment ink, which is a little more opaque, will sit on top of that navy cardstock, allowing less of that navy to show through. So you get this beautiful light blue look. If you want it to look brighter white, you could put more ink down by dabbing over the stencil instead of kind of swirling it around. Now I'm coming in on the second stencil and putting very little of the same white pigment ink, more just towards the center of those flowers. I do like to buff off the excess ink before I remove the stencil, just so it stays nice and crisp. Now we're coming in with the third stencil. Now this I didn't want to be bright, I wanted this to be darker. So I'm coming in with a very dark navy ink and filling in those little leaves. This will just make that navy cardstock in the background a bit darker, so we have some lighter areas and some darker areas. This is a beautiful way to make a kind of a monochromatic card, and I highly recommend trying it out with whatever stencils you may have. And for even darker areas, I'm actually ink blending with black ink. So there will be parts of these leaves that are super dark on that navy, and it really creates a really dramatic look. Now remember, this panel will get trimmed down to be A2 size. Just sometimes I like to start bigger so I have some options on how I cut it down. So you can see this is a very different feel than the last card we did, and the next card will look completely different too. And by the way, I do recommend heat setting this a little bit so that white ink doesn't smear, but it should dry on its own. Let's move on to our final card. This is the biggest one, the 5x7 panel, and it's on that smooth white cardstock. For this one, we're doing basic inking, but I'm doing it very light. I think a lot of us feel like we need to buy all the different ink colors, right? We need to get the pink in light, medium, dark, really dark, but a lot of times you can use one ink pad, like a medium shade, and apply it very heavy to get a dark result, or apply it very light for a very soft result. So I encourage you to look at your inks and try to stretch them by applying a light, medium, or heavy application. Now, if you have lots of ink colors, by all means, use what you have. You want to put them to good use, but do know you can do beautiful blended kind of dimensional looking stencils with less inks. Here I'm using kind of a soft to medium grapefruit color from Hero Arts that's just gorgeous. And I'm trying to make like the top of the flower petals lighter and the base a bit darker by just applying a heavier hand towards the base and a lighter hand towards the tip. Just doing that alone really goes a long way in giving more bold, impactful stencil results. Now remember, I did foil this image on the top and the bottom of the card, so I'm having to do double the stenciling. So we did the stenciling on the bottom and then on the top, and I'm just doing both at once. Now, I do think this is a great way to create a very simple card. If you have a large image or even a medium image, try stamping it once towards the bottom, once towards the top, have it meet in the middle, which is a great focal point for a sentiment. It's a great way to stretch your supplies and create a card pretty quickly. By the way, I'm working on an all-to-new sticky mat. This is a grid sticky mat that has smooth surface on the top and like a textured grid on the bottom that holds to like your glasswork surface, but is pretty easy to lift off and move. That allows me to rotate this so I can do the stenciling in different areas, but it also, notice, holds your paper and your stencil in place. You can kind of see how the stencil suctions onto it so it won't move as you do your stenciling. Very handy to have some sort of sticky mat like this one, and I will link to it below. Do know that it comes in a smaller size also, but this big one is really handy. So once I've done all of my stenciling, it's time to turn these into cards, and I have some more ideas for you. Now for that navy card, remember I started with a longer piece? That way I could trim it down where I wanted to. Instead of making it kind of centered on the navy, I decided to have it kind of coming out from the top corner of the card, giving it a different feel. So now here are our 3 panels. I did trim them down a little bit so that I will have a white trim when I put them on a note card. So the A2 in the center, the navy piece, is 4 by 5 1/4. The blue piece on the left is 4 1/4 by 6 inches. And the bigger piece on the right is 4 3/4 inches by 6 3/4 inches. So these will all fit nicely on the 3 note card sizes that I showed you earlier. I wanted to add these onto my card bases with a bit of dimension. You could stack up scrap cardstock, but another option is to use foam sheets. I really like the Spellbinders foam sheets because they come in the beautiful colors you see here, not like the cheesy colors that we used as a kid. These are gorgeous. So you can actually die cut from these and use these on your card. You don't have to just use them for dimension, but they're also fun to use for dimension behind your die cuts, and that way when you peek from the side you see a pretty color instead of just white. So I am choosing colors of the foam that are closest to the colors of cardstock that I chose, and I will cut pieces from this to put behind our card panels. Now again, you can use scraps, but this is definitely a time saver, and it gives beautiful dimension that holds up very nicely in the mail. If you would like to see a video on proof on why you should use full foam sheets or stacked cardstock instead of foam strips, I will link to a video I did years ago, and you can check that up here on the top right or in the description below. By the way, these foam sheets cut very beautifully with a trimmer, and as I mentioned, they die cut nicely, so they're very easy to cut to whatever size you need. By the way, I should mention that I had trouble with my new camera in this video. The lighting kind of is a little bit wonky here and there in the video, and I apologize for that. I'm working on it. So now I'm putting some tape runner on the back of my card panel. I'll put the foam sheet on that and then put adhesive on my note card and place the foam sheet on that. You could also use liquid adhesive with these foam sheets. Both work just fine. And remember, this white note card is cut to 4.5 by 6.25 inches. Now it's time for a sentiment, and I'm using a Pink and Main die set that I really like. This is just one of many they have in this style. I really like this thank you, and I thought it fit nicely there at the center. So I cut the shadow die from white cardstock, and then the word thank you itself from gold matte cardstock from Simon Says Stamp, and I glued that there at the center of our card. I did add a little gold butterfly. I'll show you that butterfly here in a moment. And you can see I've glued it so the wings kind of perk up a little bit on the edge. And that's it for the card. You could add gemstones, but I really feel like this larger foil and stenciled image filled this A6 card nicely. Again, this note card is 4.5 by 6.25 inches in the end. And it has that beautiful blue coloring inside of that sparkly gold foil. Now let's do the biggest card. This is the 5x7. So I cut a piece of craft foam that's a little bit smaller than my panel, and I'm gluing it onto a gold note card. Yep, this 5x7 note card I made from gold matte cardstock from Simon Says Stamp. So it's gold on the outside, so the front and the back is gold. The inside is white, so you can add a message there, which I'll show you in a moment. I will also use that same thank you sentiment that I used on the last card from Pink and Main. I think it's got a great style to it. And I kind of put it off to the side. You could put it top center as like a centered focal point, but I thought it'd be fun to kind of have it a little bit differently. And I tucked a few of the gold die cut butterflies around it. On the last card, I just used one butterfly, but since this card is bigger, I thought 3 would be fun. I like to use 3 different size butterflies and create kind of a visual triangle around our sentiment, which really draws your eye in. When adding the butterflies, I put a drop of strong liquid adhesive on the back center, like on the back of the body. This is Gina K Connect liquid adhesive. And then I press it right onto my card and I give it some time to dry. I then later can come back and peel up those unadhered wings and squeeze a big glob of glue behind them, which will force them to kind of stay up and give great results in the end. Now, whenever I make a bigger 5x7 card, I like to stamp something on the inside since the inside is so big. This time I'm using this Simon Says Stamp CZ Design Just a Note stamp set. This 6x8 stamp set is an incredible one. It has so many great sentiments for inside of cards that aren't like your typical sentiments. They're much more creative, much more natural sounding, I think, and I will be using this a lot in videos, especially inside of those bigger cards where there's a lot of room to write a personal message. This kind of fills in some of the space. Now I wanted to stamp this on the center inside of my card, and to do so I needed some help to make sure it was straight and centered. So I'm using the Simon Says Stamp placement grid guides. These are really handy. There's 2 sizes. The smaller one is meant to use with A2 cards, the smallest size that I'm showing in this video. But this bigger one here can be used for different card sizes. You can see there's an A7 marked there with the pink line. Now, I mostly use this grid mat, or this placement guide here, for A7. So I bought an extra one and I'm cutting it at that A7 size. Just so I know it's just a little bit easier for me to see. I don't use the slim line, so I might as well just cut that off. But you definitely don't have to do that to be able to use the placement guide. Next, I'm using a black Sharpie pen to put a dot right at the center of that, so I know where the center point is on a 5x7. Now, I've done this in the past, and I already have one made off screen, but I bought another one to cut down and mark up so I could show you in this video. I also put a little piece of Scotch tape on it so that Sharpie doesn't come off if I were to spray this with rubbing alcohol. So this is a tool that I use whenever I have a 5x7 card. Now here I have a piece of peach cardstock that is cut to be slightly smaller than 5x7, and this will go inside of my card. I'm placing it onto my grip mat that is inside of my MISTI stamping tool. Then I place the guide on top of it. And then I can put my sentiment on top of that and use the grid lines to make sure it's straight, and that dot to kind of figure out where I have the placement of my stamp so it's kind of top center. And now I can stamp my sentiment. If you wanted to, you could leave that placement guide, that clear grid placement guide on top of your cardstock and stamp on that first to test it out. And if you're happy with it, you can go ahead and stamp on your cardstock and just wipe your placement guide clean. I just find that to be a helpful tool. You can also create your own, but these placement guides from Simon Says Stamp are nice and thick and really work well. So now I can glue this on the inside of our 5x7 card. Okay, so let's look at the completed card. This is 5x7. It's a gold note card. So you have that gold trim around the edge, and the back side is gold, but the inside is white. And you can see the beautiful gold foiling with the soft inking that we did on it, and our focal point with that sentiment and butterflies kind of drawing your eye in. Now the inside is very big, right? Lots of room to write a personal message. So you could do some foiling and stenciling on the inside to kind of pull it all together, but I instead went with the simple sentiment. Okay, let's finish off that last card. This is the smallest, the A2 card size. For that stamp sentiment, I use this really elegant stamp set from Simon Says Stamp called Etched Greetings. Beautiful images on here. There's even a coordinating die that would cut out this small sentiment, but I just stamped it on a cardstock strip scrap that I had. And I'm using this great Spellbinders die set. I'm going to be using this a lot in an upcoming video, and I've used it before. It's the fresh picked sentiment dies. So I die cut hello 3 times from white cardstock and glued it together and added it right at the top center corner there. And then I stamped the sentiment with navy ink to match the navy background and glued it below. And I added one of those little white butterflies. Now again, I like to put my sentiment right at the focal point, which I felt was the center of those flowers, but you definitely could put the sentiment down towards the bottom so you don't cover up the flowers if you prefer. Totally up to you. But on this design, we took that larger element and had it kind of come out from the top corner, giving it a different feel. And now here are our 3 cards made with pretty much the same products, but different stenciling techniques and different card sizes. You have the A2, A6, and the A7. This is just a really fun way to kind of get your creativity going by changing up your card size. Again, I really encourage you try it. I will link to that video about the card sizes up here and in the description and at the end of this video. And before I go, I wanted to share a bit of crafty news. Several of you said that adding this at the end of the videos is helpful, so here it is. First of all, if you are shopping over at Spellbinders, some of the products that I used today, they have some really great ways to save in a die sale that they're having, so be sure to check that out. It'll be in my description below. Many of the dies on sale are products that I've used in previous videos. Also, they have available for pre-order a new color of the Spellbinders Platinum that you saw me use earlier today. I used the white version, but they have this lilac version with flowers on it coming out. Absolutely beautiful. And they have coming out a smaller platinum. It's called Platinum Scout. It's a smaller version of the die cut machine. So it's still mighty strong, but a smaller size. And that's available in the white and that lilac too. Now, if you're a club member over at Spellbinders, you can pre-order now. If you're not, you can pre-order on the 10th, so set an alarm for that. And it is the 6th of the month. That means there are new club products available over at Spellbinders. These are the products that you can subscribe to at a really, really good price. And you have a choice of what you subscribe to, such as dies, glimmer plates, embossing folders, or whatever. Great prices, and they're available starting today. And this month's theme is like this tropical feel, and I am loving those birds and plan to use them in a video soon. I hope sharing that is helpful to you. If you're interested in anything I talk about here or any of the supplies I used, it's always linked in my description below. I do have at the top a link to a visual supply list. If you click that, it opens up a new window where you see visual thumbnails of the different products, which makes it easier to find what you're looking for, and you can find more inspiration on those product pages. At the end here, I'll link to a couple of the other videos that I mentioned. I appreciate you spending this time with me. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again soon.